Brian,
Yes.
I think that I'm going to submit an advisory inquiry asking if this Senate amendment changes the schedule, like taking office in the spring semester. Will that apply to the 14th Senate? So just heads up.
Oh, wait.
If the amendment
You mean the
passes,
15th? You mean the 15th Senate?
this current Senate, if the amendment passes, will the 14th Senate last until January?
Yeah. God.
So just,
I knew
I'll
something.
leave you to, it has to be figured out.
Yeah, I know. I was talking about a child yesterday. It gives me such a headache. It's like circles. It's like, well,
Because they happen at the same time.
exactly. You haven't said that. So it's like the current constitution says that it begins and ends in the fall election, but the new amendment says starts in January. And so I get in this circle of like,
You just have to figure it out.
what am I going to? And the advisory thing isn't binding, so
I know.
you can ask like for full J board to get involved too. If you want.
No, I figure Neiman and Sean will take the advisory opinion if it's good, and if it's not,
Go with it.
we can do another one.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's trying to get the best out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking about that on and off, but I don't think about it too long until I start getting. Yeah.
All right, well, I'm gonna make you,
Okay, thanks.
of course.
Because the problem is like I have no governing document to base anything off of. It's the Constitution, like it just says that it's a manual ratified now. Okay, yeah, submit your thing.
Oh, no.
Oh. Sorry.
Also keep 20, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I know. That's a very good question. It's very secure, especially if it's not right. Yeah, exactly.
I had like taken to the store to get things and it just took like a full week for it to get fixed. That's really complex stuff. Yeah, and like I'm trying to like write essays and do my quizzes and shit, and it's like you have to re-log in every time you open it. I know. How'd it go? Okay, that's it. Oh, what class? All my classes are like, professional degree classes. I'm not sure at all. We have classes. I've been like less than I probably should, but it's because my professors are really remember. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I like it's just like
I'll ask him. Yeah, no, I'll just ask. Yeah, it's like most of you will be out then.
Yes.
We're still at 18, so we need 10 for quorum. Yeah, yeah, she's, had a lot going on. So that's why she's absent, but yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah. She was able to.
My first year.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I know. 18.
Yeah, 18. So
No,
10.
the second year.
I thought he was here. So
Yeah.
Oh,
7, 8, 9, 10,
And then you're trying to do it with your phone.
11. Yeah, I can't go.
When I call for my you can say I brought 2%.
Yep. That's my boy.
For me, it's like.
Decor.
Oh.
Yeah, no, everybody. Okay, yeah.
It's like a bittersweet.
Yeah, yeah, no, I got it. Yeah, okay.
It's just comes right at you.
So, have fun, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, we are now gonna call the 19th meeting to order.
Yep.
All right, we'll start with roll. Senator Christopher.
Here by proxy.
Okay. Senator Henry.
here.
Senator Hayashi.
Here.
Senator Klein.
Here.
Senator Rodriguez.
Here.
Senator Jenkins. All right, Senator Nylander.
Here.
Senator Max Robbins. All right, Senator Ward.
Here.
Senator Abascara.
Here still.
Okay. Senator Perez. All right, Senator Sellinger. Senator Sony. Senator Stillwell. Absent. Senator Butler. Senator Menashe.
Oh, hi.
And Senator Jacob Robbins. All right, quorum is met. Moving to the adoption of the agenda. Any discussion on the agenda? Bobby?
This isn't on the agenda, but I'm just wondering whether you're keeping track of people's attendance, because I think
Yes.
that it's 3 absences and you're out, and I think some people have been absent 3 times this year.
Yes, we've been keeping track, and they've either had waivers or they've been excused,
Thanks.
yeah. All right, further discussion on the agenda. Curtis?
I'd like to add an update from the secretary
Oh, sure.
on behalf of and his staff.
And you'll be giving the update? Okay. Further discussion on the agenda? Wait.
Table bill 18.
Oh, yes, thank you. All right, further discussion. Okay, seeing no further discussion, it will be adopted. All right, moving to the adoption of the minutes. Any discussion on the 18th meeting minutes? Seeing no discussion, it'll be adopted without objection. Moving to public comment. Any member of the public wishing to speak at this time? Okay, seeing no public, we'll move straight to reports from the officers. First to Comptroller Zitzman.
Got some slides for you. Yes, somebody has to. All right. Hi, everybody. So there used to be a requirement in the bylaws for my position that I come out with monthly financial activity updates for our organization. That no longer exists, but I think it's a good idea, so I'm going to do it anyway. Here it is. I'll publish one of these every month. This is the first one. So it is kind of bare bones right now, but as the year goes on, I will have more content that I'm able to put in. Here's a printout version if you want, but basically everything that I talk about in here, I've also got in this PowerPoint, this Google Slides presentation. So on the first slide, we have an overview of the budget. There it is in a table, everybody's account and how much they got at the start of this year. And I also broke it down on this pie chart. So it's almost entirely programming, 96% for the 4 programming boards. And most of that is between the 3 big KPU Sub and Founders Day. And then the co-sponsorship fund also shows up as a sliver, $8,000 there. And then the rest of it, you can't even see if you break them up into different slices, but it's in that little orange other. So that's the budget that was created last April. And then on the next slide, what do we have? So we've spent almost $50,000 so far as of September. These will be monthly updates, but for this one, since it's the first one, it's everything that's happened from May 1st when I took office through the end of September. And the spending that has happened so far in October is not on this slide. So that's about almost 9% of the budget, and that big remaining section remains unspent, $521,000 and change. And then on the next slide, we can see how much has been spent by account. So as you can see, most of it is on KPU, and then we have a little bit on sub and a few of the other accounts. This is hard to use, though. It's good if you want to get a scale of how much money everybody has, but the next slide is more useful if you want to look at individual accounts, because this is by a percentage. So KPU, again, has spent the most money, about a quarter of their budget. The account that has spent the greatest amount of their money in terms of a proportion is the co-sponsorship fund, which is a little bit more than a quarter. That's what we use to co-sponsor club events and travel. That's $8,000 there. Sub has spent money, but Founders, Case, and the Community Service Coalition have not spent any money, and the rest have spent kind of a small amount of money. What do we have next? Let's see. Okay, so like I said, most of the spending is done by KPU. This pie chart here is of all the money that's been spent, where does it come from? And it's pretty much exclusively KPU money. KPU has spent $41,785 out of the $49,000 that has been spent. And there on that table is with the rest of what everybody actually has spent and what they have left, pretty much the same stuff as the previous slides. Next, what do we have? Okay, so of KPU spending, the largest share, about half, is speaking fees, and those are confidential, but I can display the full amount. I can't tell you what individual speakers' speaking fees are, but it's about half of what KPU has spent so far. Then we have production costs, the second largest, merchandise for KPU members, which this body has traditionally been against and voted for a recommendation last year that student government not spend money on internal merchandise, so that might be relevant for you all. They've spent, I think, like $4,000 on that and about 6.5% of their budget. So that's all on the website if you want to take a look at it in your oversight capacities. I don't have any control over KPU's budget, but you all do. And then we have venues, catering, and other expenses. So attendance at KPU events so far has been pretty good. I think they put on 4 or 5 events, and total attendance has been 1,516. That's pretty good. If you take all of their spending, so spending on events like speaking fees and production, as well as spending outside of events like the $1,200 they spent on quarter zips for their staff, if you take all of that spending that KPU has done and divide it by the total number of people who have attended their events, that is $27.60 of KPU spending per event attendee. And that's pretty good. KPU takes about $35, I think, from every student's student activity fee if you're a full-time student. So that that's one metric you could use. It's not super helpful because that would mean that the smaller your budget is, like WI has a relatively small budget compared to KPU, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their events have to be much cheaper. But that's one metric you can use. And by that metric, KPU spending per event attendee is pretty low. So yeah, that's that. And then on the next slide, I think we have WI. So their events so far have been very inexpensive because they haven't hired a speaker yet who has speaking fees. That's what we love to see. So 2/3 of their spending has been co-sponsorship. They co-sponsored the recent KPU event with Dreamhampton, and they spent $2,000 on that co-sponsorship. So that takes up most of the, I think they've spent $2,900. And then they've got some catering and food for their events and other spending. So their attendance at 2 events that they've had so far has been 90, not bad. And I've used a different metric here instead of total spending divided by attendees because they haven't had that many events yet. So I took the spending that they spent on their events, so speaking fees, production, catering, every spending that goes into an event, divided by the amount of people who attended that event. So like event spending per event attendee, the average of the 2 events they've had is $6.12. I think one was $7 per attendee and one was $5. So it comes out to about $6 per attendee. That's also pretty good. KPU has put on WI has put on some really cost-effective events this year. Founders obviously hasn't put on anything yet, and SUD has only put on 1 event, but I couldn't get attendance data from it. They spent $900 to screen some movie. I forgot what it was, and I don't know how many people attended that, but that's a small part of their budget. So club co-sponsorships, we've done 6 so far. Let's see, we did PRSSA, our Public Relations Student Society, to help them travel to their national conference. We are helping the debate team travel to their tournaments that they go to every weekend because AUCC has put limits this year on how much money clubs can get from them on travel. So we're helping them fill the rest of that. LCDA, which is our African dance team, had a party this year for their club and for other people as well. And we helped them hire DJs for that. Project Pengyo is an intercultural exchange club for Chinese students and American students, and they put on an event for the Mid-Autumn Festival, which is a Chinese holiday, and we helped them buy craft supplies and food for that. Caribbean Circle is having their annual Welcome Back event that we always co-sponsor in student government, so that's good that we keep that partnership going. And LULAC is having an event coming up, and we gave them some money for t-shirts and stickers at that event. And then what do we have next? So on AUSG.org/budget, you can find out all the current budget for the year, all the stipends and records of our spending on a public spending spreadsheet that I look at every day, and I look at our spending records at least once a day. And if anything is new, I update the spreadsheet. So just know that that is updated daily. So the newest information you could want is at AUSG.org/budget. And while I'm on this slide, it's not about the budget, but this week, starting this week, our election information session. So I would encourage you all again to run for re-election because the Senate works best if it's a good mix of returning members and new members. But historically, the returning members have been very small, like 3 out of 30. So please run again if you have the time. And then are there any questions about the budget or anything?
Questions for the comptroller, Jeremy?
I guess I have a couple. So my first question is, do you think that the monthly financial activity report is an important thing for the comptroller to give to the Senate?
It depends on how you take it. Because I've seen it done by 2 comptrollers, and both of them I saw get suspended for not doing it. But when they did do it, they basically just presented the information that was on the website. That's not helpful. anybody can find that, and the information that was on the website wasn't very extensive. The way I'm doing it, I'm trying to provide more of an evaluative lens on it. So I think that is helpful. It helps students have, people always talk about our spending, but it's better if they're more informed, obviously. The more people know about it, the more productive those conversations are. And it's helpful for the Senate when you all have your annual your constant responsibility of oversight. It's good to have data for that. And then your annual responsibility for making the budget. I think the more you know about how the money was spent in previous year, the better the budget turns out to be. So I think, like, I'm a big data person, so the more evaluative data you have, that's important. If the comptroller is just going to say, this is on the website, that is not so important.
And then my second question was, in KP, you said they were doing merchandise inside KP. I think it's like 4.6% or something.
Yeah, 6.7.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other, I guess are there any other like programming boards that do that within Vice President's cabinet?
Not this year. Last year, WI spent some money on staff jackets.
Okay.
And that was something when the Senate adopted some financial recommendations from a financial transparency report that the Finance Committee put out that year. One of those recommendations was to either like really reduce or just eliminate purchases of internal merchandise. And that was motivated partly by the WI spending on that this year. And the general student government is considering some purchases of like general merchandise to hand out to the student body as part of our rebranding. But that is kind of distinct from internal merchandise. So far this year, internal merchandise has only been KPU, according to all the records I have, which is, as far as I know, all of them.
And do you know like what they purchased?
Yeah, so they spent, and this is all on the website at AUSG.org/budget. So they spent $1,200 on quarter zip jackets. They bought T-shirts for their staff, mugs, and lapel pins. I think that's everything, but it's all on the website.
Abby?
So when you look at like how many people attend each event, can you see like each time if there is like, I don't know how to like phrase it, but can you see like a percentage of like new people attending their events? Like, are they bringing in new people to their events, or is it like the same couple of people every time coming to
Yeah,
their
that's a good
events?
point. So previously, the way the programming boards did this was just to have someone of their staff with a person clicker go around and click how many people are here. Under that system, no, you can't do that. Now they're using Cork, the app where you scan in with your event pass. If you haven't downloaded Cork, C-O-R-Q, that's how you can learn about all of our events. So under that system, there's probably a way to do that on the back end. I don't have that information because I just asked the programming boards, hey, I'm putting together this report every month. Can you send me your attendance? And they just gave me the numbers you saw. So like, I can't do that, but it might be possible depending on what the programming boards have.
Further questions for the comptroller? Kurt?
Bobby, you briefly mentioned the movie night that the student union board put on in the amphitheater on September 4th. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
yeah, that's the movie.
Do you, what were the attendance numbers if you had it? And how much money was spent on that event?
So I don't have the attendance numbers, but all of Sub's money so far has been spent on that movie. So Sean, if we could go back a few slides to the one we were just on. So Sub has spent $1,400. So that is how much money they spent on that movie, I believe.
Right, because, thank you for mentioning that, just because for the record, I would love for someone, possibly Kata, to look into it, because, I mean, on Instagram, they got 22 likes on one of their promotion posts, and about 20 people showed up.
All right.
And it's a $1,500 event, roughly.
Yeah, that's the kind of analytics.
And I was there, and I have a picture of it, and it's a lot of money. That's all I can say.
That's true. Yeah, for that event, I think there were two big expenses. That one was $900, and one must have been a few $100s as well, to get the screen, the big screen that you put it on, and the screening rights. So yeah, that's for you all to consider whether you think that's a good use of money. I don't have to answer your other question. I don't have the attendance numbers for that.
And just a question for Bobby, because you were in the Senate last year and you know what the rules are for the bylaws. Is the student union board director going to present or, be in touch with the Senate at all
Yeah.
this year?
There's nothing in the currently existing rules about that. I think the programming policy book, which is up for consideration today, has a requirement for the programming board directors to report to the Senate every month. But if not, you can add that if you want.
Further questions for the comptroller? All right, seeing no further questions, thank you. Oh,
Thank you.
thanks, Bobby.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
What?
Oh, no, you're good.
Okay.
All right, now moving to Case Director Moore for her presentation.
So I just wanted to give you guys a brief update of what we've been doing with Case so far and what we have the rest of the semester, anything really. And then if you have any questions of what we're doing and anything you'd like to see, just let me know. Next slide. So I just did a little breakdown of the cases. It's been evenly distributed across the board, except for ROTC. We haven't had any cases with that. So that's one thing I do want to maybe like at the end of this semester consider. There's not a lot Case can do with ROTC students from what I've come to understand. So I think that might be something for end of the year to consider maybe rewriting. And like I know in the bylaws it's written that we should have ROTC, but it's very different and there's, like I said, there's just not much we can do. And I've talked to a lot of administration, so that's something, maybe most of it comes from helping them with like early registration, and that's pretty much it. So that may be something to consider because right now we have a department that we're not doing anything with. So our resources could be like better allocated essentially. And then everything else has been evenly distributed. It's been a little interesting. We've had a slower uptake in cases so far. I talked with the administration and they say it's just a fluke kind of this year. People were not getting in trouble, which is a great thing. So I'm kind of glad that we're not having a lot of cases because that means students are doing well. But then it's expected to increase. So the next slide. Just some things we've already done. We did a coffee event at the bridge, which was kind of a bust, I would say. We did it at night and there was no one really in the bridge. So that was just a mistake on our part with regard to marketing. And then because we're going to do a tabling event, which is going to be really helpful because we're going to set up a quad. We have flyers with our QR code, which goes to the Google form, which is our Case form that people can do now. They can also email in or do a drop-in hours with our ops hours, but that we've been getting a lot of cases through there, so that's really helpful. And then we also put flyers throughout the freshman dorms. We're still going to be doing that. We want to get to East Campus and stuff. So if you see a blue flyer with a QR code, that's Case. It will have our name on it and all of that. Next one. And then just some things we have coming up. We have a Title IX and conduct policy event. It's specifically for club leadership. So for example, like Model UN, any like FSL, fraternity and sorority, like clubs are going to come. They're invited to. We're going to send out email invitations. Just let them know what the policies are, what they can do, how they can help their members, and also comply with AU rules and regulations. And then that's going to be October 15th, probably from 7 to 9 in Ward or Kerwin. And then we're also going to do a table event, like I mentioned. And then we have a booth at Fall Fest, which is not the 17th, it's 27th. That's my bad. On a Sunday, we're going to also hand out flyers. We'll have Case staff there. Weather permitting, it might be like on the quad and or it'll be a vendor. But that'll be a good event to have. We've been partnering with RHA on that, and we're going to do a lot more partnerships, I hope, in the future. Maybe Case, people hand out like pizza and donuts in there. Maybe we do something like that just to let people know that we're a resource. And then we also Title IX and tacos. That's something we've always done with the Title IX department. So we're going to do that again. Hopefully mid-November. That's dependent on when Title IX administration and policy department wants to do that. And then also a conduct event because there's been changes to the conduct code. So we're waiting for all of that to be rolled out officially, and then we're going to do it in partnership. My help is with the Center for Diversity and Inclusion, and then also the conduct thing. I want to make it kind of a panel event where students come and ask questions, essentially a public forum, but also not because we have to comply with what the administration wants to do. But we're going to partner with them. I want a big turnout of that because the changes that have been made are going to be big, and I hope it's going to continue in the future. So, any questions?
Edward?
I have a question about training.
Yes.
You said that y'all had finished that. Like, when did y'all start on training and how long did it take to complete it?
Yeah, so we did training. We hired our staff during welcome week, I think, during break. Yeah, okay, perfect. So we hired it around there. And then training was the first 2 weeks. So we had training in Title IX, conduct, and academics. And then financial aid is something we're still trying to figure out because that's also tough with what we can do with that. But we had 2 training opportunities for all those departments. So in case you couldn't make it to one of them, here's the next one. For Title IX, 2 hours, academics 1 hour, conduct 2 hours. So, yeah.
And then who was like in charge of, like, did you organize when the training events happened? Like, who kind of?
Yeah, so with the administration, I did it, but then for like conduct, for example, it's Katie Perez who runs the conduct department. Yeah. Regina for Title IX, and then Dr. Thomas for academics. So they did the whole event. They did the training, but I just organized when it would be, and then relay that information to staff as well. And also, chief advocates also helped with that. And they kept track of who went, because we don't want people doing cases, obviously, that haven't been trained. So, yeah.
Further questions for the director? Curtis?
Yes, Cassie, thank you so much for your presentation. I had a quick question about the Title IX and Conduct Policy event. So it's open to any student, but just particularly club and or student org leadership.
I think it's gonna be an invitation only event because it's gonna be really specific to like, what I wanna do is, we've talked with, the Center for Student Involvement of how clubs can put in their constitutions language that we're regarding like Title IX policy at AU, so it's all compliant. So it's gonna be specifically for that, but the Title IX talk is always the whole campus. And then we're also doing, Greek Life Wellness just reached out on Friday, I believe, about doing a joint event on the 14th. So that might just be where like I go, or maybe our chief advocate for Title IX goes and explains the policy. That'd be because it's domestic violence awareness month. So that's in case we'll have some part in that as well.
And then just in terms of, the coffee event turnout.
Yeah.
I know it wasn't as planned, so I guess what have you learned from it? And also, I remember that last semester, there was like a coffee with cops sort of thing with
Yeah,
AUPD.
AUPD.
Will that also happen again this semester?
I talked with Angela a lot with that. That also had a smaller turnout. So one thing we're trying to figure out is how we can get big turnouts for those events, because information is really valuable, but students just don't always come. And then definitely have learned that we should not be doing PR events at night in the bridge during midterm times. That's our bad. But just we've learned with how to promote things in a better way. It's still like a learning curve. We're sort of figure out. And we just have to get people. Yeah.
Right, and I guess what avenues of social media can we follow you on?
Yes. Okay. You can follow on kates.au at Instagram, and then our Facebook page, which is the Center for Advocacy and Student Activity. We have a Twitter, but it's not very active because a lot of people don't really use Twitter too much. So those are the 2 main ones. And we want to be doing a newsletter. I think is something our comms department's thinking of doing, which would be helpful. And we're like kind of following the Community Service Coalition's lead on that because they have really good newsletter, and also the same comms people. So.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Any further questions for the director? Wrigley?
What are your office hours?
All day, all from 9 to 5. There will be someone in the office. So it's 270A in MGT, right by like the executive offices. So everyone's always there. Sometimes people aren't there, and we try to fix that. But also, right when there's my email, if people aren't there at that time. Yeah.
Any further questions?
All day meeting 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, not weekends.
All right, seeing that, thanks. Now moving to Director Hayashi for the Secretary's Cabinet.
Yes.
Whoa, isn't it my turn?
Sean.
Oh, yes,
Yeah, it's
Chairman Fu.
Director.
Yeah.
Oh, no, but I added Director Hayashi before you. I'm sorry.
Wow.
We-
Well, it's his turn, man. Got what he thought.
All right, so there are no analytics updates this week, but as the analytics come in, we'll let you know. Please follow AUSG, K's, WI, everyone follow them on social media, the Student Union Board, and that's one way to stay informed and how we in the Senate can be involved with these events and to attend them. So James met with the co-chairs of the AU Student Media to discuss communications with them for the year, and I will be sending members of the student media, judicial board action, Senate agendas, executive board meeting minutes. And also James met with Amy from the Sign Institute. There were some social media posts about it to discuss programming, communications, and collaboration with the Sign Institute for this academic year. The e-board is also meeting with the GW Student Association, which is the equivalent of our student government, to discuss how they plan to rebrand their organization. And this will happen on Tuesday. And then, AU, GW members of the student government and student association can share and collaborate with ideas on how to rebrand our organizations and to also to be effective users on social media when it comes to posting for events, publishing dates and, letting the AU community know about, what's going on with, AUSG. And also after the fact, posting recap photos and thank you messages on social media. The Secretary's Cabinet will also make a purchase for a new website this Tuesday. It will be a much more cleaner look for both on your desktop and on your mobile devices, just because the current website it's sort of losing its pizzazz. We're moving into a new decade next year, so and there may be some rebranding efforts going on our end. So we will also be saving a lot of money annually, $1,600, which is a lot of money. So that's what's going on in the Secretary's Cabinet, and the old website will go down sometime before December. So I am open to any questions.
All right, questions for the director? Do you have okay, questions? All right, seeing no questions, thanks, Kurt.
Thank you.
All right, now moving to Chair Crew. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, is it my turn?
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. So I only have two things to talk about. One, last week I told you about that there was a complaint against the executive board with regard to the student involvement fund. I would just like to apologize in advance for accepting that inquiry, because after talking with Ayana and reviewing the governing documents, I realized that I should have dismissed that on a basis of a lack of jurisdiction. I was conflicted when I accepted the inquiry, but I thought better to accept it and then deal with the jurisdictional issues before the hearing, that rather than dismissing it over if we did need to deal with it. So I accepted it. I don't have the date written down here about when I rescinded it. It was Tuesday, that I rescinded the acceptance of the inquiry and the injunction, because the student involvement fund, and I knew this, but I just wanted to double check. The student involvement fund is under the authority of BAC. And while AUSG plays a part in that, the question was over the executive board's behavior with regard to the fund. So that kind of is in our jurisdiction, but just overall the fund isn't. So the first question in the inquiry was are the requirements for the fund discriminatory? When I first accepted the inquiry, in my mind, it was already that we can't really deal with that question because BAC and the people on that set the requirements, not just AUSG. And then just in general, the bylaws have a statement in this Article 10, I want to say, that discusses BAC, says that the Senate explicitly has oversight over anything student government does related to BAC, which would include the fund. I didn't inform myself before I accepted it. I should have, but didn't. So again, apologies for everyone who started making preparations, Bobby especially. Who started making preparations for the hearing. The hearing did not happen, and it will not be rescheduled. J-Board's not gonna talk about this anymore. Proxies. The hot take of student government recently. I received an inquiry from Eric Brock, who he is former J-Board, but that didn't influence any of this, my decision or anything. requesting an advisory opinion about whether members of the executive branch can be proxies. And the advisory opinion was 14.003. I did kind of an extensive look at the governing documents, and all my logic and breakdown of it is all my opinion. I'm not going to read it or go through every point, but I decided that it is a violation of the Constitution for the executives to be proxies, but there's nothing in there explicitly saying that cabinet members or people who are paid or anything can't be proxies. The opinion itself is not binding, and I have to keep making that clear because I think there's some confusion. Advisory opinions are non-binding decisions that are essentially just people asking me my opinion on something, like just the chair's opinion on something. So the opinion itself doesn't carry any weight, therefore nothing in Senate or in the rest of the government can be invoked on the authority of the opinion. I did think that because this matter dealt with a procedural thing in Senate and potentially violated the Constitution, I did email Sean and the rest of the executives saying that it's my opinion that Sean can't accept proxy requests if it's one of the 4 executives or the chief of staff or the Residence Hall Association president. But that's Heyman, she's on J board, so she wouldn't do it anyway. Or me as acting parliamentarian, I can't. Because the Constitution says that those 7 people or 6 can have speaking rights but can't vote in Senate. So to give them proxy status would give them a right to vote, which in my opinion can't happen. The legislation you have regarding the proxies and everything, the opinion in the parliamentary notice I gave doesn't influence the legislation in any way. Regardless of what kind of you put in there, it doesn't limiting people. It doesn't really regard to any of that. The opinion in the notice I gave just relates to the 4 executives. If you put in something in there about the 4 executives can be proxies, then we might run into a little more of an issue, but I'm not going to comment on that. That's your prerogative to put that in there. I think that's it. So the search thing went away. Proxy thing is somewhat over, but it doesn't affect your guys' conversations. That's it.
All right, questions for the chair?
I have
Johnny.
I have a parliamentary inquiry. I don't know if that's the way, I have a question.
Okay.
Just for me,
As a parliamentarian, I have a
like in
question.
terms of procedure, what we're doing right
Yes.
now? Sure.
Since the person who filed that is here, are we allowed to ask him questions?
No. You can
No.
give him speaking rights and then question him, but
Okay.
as of right now, he can't.
So can I move to give him speaking rights? Because I think that this is an interesting thing.
We're not in a section
Yeah,
of the
We're
agenda.
still on reports from officers.
So motions really can't be made right now.
Message him on Facebook.
Yeah, you're free to talk to him.
Well, no,
True.
because I think that the Senate may learn something, in general, from what his standpoint was
Mhm.
with why. So that's why I was wondering if there was a way that we could all hear. what
He can talk about it in public comment if he wants to.
Okay.
I don't think you guys can question him in public comment, but and I'm not going to say you're free to message him privately. I'm not his spokesperson.
That's just my question. Thank you, though.
But yeah. So.
All right, further questions for the chair, Bobby?
So let's go back in time to last week, when you
Fun.
came out. Yeah. Now we have that opportunity, you came out with a series of opinions. One of them had to do with a rule that CRP and Senate adopted to the judicial register, saying that the judicial board couldn't unilaterally edit the text of the governing documents. So you originally proposed in the judicial register that the judicial board could delete things pursuant to a binding opinion.
Yeah.
The Senate got rid of that and replaced it with something else, and you got rid of what they replaced it with.
Yeah.
But what remains absent from the judicial register in any case is the original provision allowing the judicial board to delete text.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, if you were going to do it anyway, after the Senate had removed it and that rule no longer existed in the judicial register, what was the point in the first place of proposing that if you were just going to do it anyway?
I think the point was just to kind of codify it. That's the word. Kind of just put it in there to be clear. to everybody, kind of more transparency. It's not written down anywhere, it's just kind of the way J-Board has interpreted its role in student government. I think we just wanted to make it kind of clear on paper somewhere that that's what we could do.
Further questions, Bobby?
Yeah, and then also on this point where like you proposed a system for J-Board to operate with, and then the Senate decisively disagreed with you and put in a new system. And then without anybody asking you, the judicial board unilaterally, before the next Senate even had a time to meet next week, got rid of it and put in what you wanted to do. Like, what would you say to the proposition that demonstrates that the judicial board is putting itself beyond the ability of the Senate to regulate? Like the Senate went through its proper procedure and tried to regulate you, and they did decisively 2 times. And then you guys just said, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Senate is welcome to regulate and has oversight over the executive and J-Board, that's clear in the Constitution, but it comes to an issue when you tie our hands too much and you start taking away things that we view as our constitutional ability and responsibilities. So yes, Senate is welcome to adopt the things it wants, but Senate can't just adopt whatever it wants without itself being checked too. And so, yes, I issued the injunction putting a hold on it, but J-Board issued a unanimous opinion about it. I'm not trying to drag the rest of them down, but this wasn't just me doing everything permanent. That injunction wasn't permanent. That injunction required a J-Board hearing within 5 days. Not a hearing, J-Board to get together and discuss it. So that's kind of what brought it on.
And one more follow-up if I could. The only thing the Constitution says about the judicial board, it's just one subsection, if I remember correctly. It just says that you guys can offer authoritative answers on the governing documents. So what about that says that the judicial board can change the text, even if it's just deleting things, can change the text of documents without the regulation of the Senate, without the Senate saying this is how you can change the text. The judicial board just found this one subsection that just says you guys can say answers about something and say this Senate cannot regulate the way that we do this. Like,
well,
how is that?
Well, the Constitution says we're the final authority on the governing documents. So to say that we need Senate's permission after we decide something would give Senate the final authority on what we say, which this is getting into the murky waters of checks and balances and who has oversight over who and things like that. But as the final authority on things, we had a couple issues. We had 2 main issues. One was the final authority thing, that if Senate was allowed to give itself power over what J-Board says, and ultimately give them the final say on things, that would take away our final authority ability in the Constitution. Also, the proposal about J-Board proposing legislation to the Senate is a little, we don't think is right. So we got rid of that part on that thought, that we can't do that.
All right. Any further questions for the chair, Jeremy?
I have 2 questions. So our first question is, when you invalidated, when J-Board essentially invalidated the provision that was passed, why was that? Like, why did you invalidate it?
So kind of because of what I just discussed was because we saw it as Senate exercising its right to pass legislation. No one's questioning that, but we're questioning, did Senate kind of overstep itself in limiting J-Board too much? And we thought, yes, it was. And so we, like I said, we went through the proper procedures of doing that. Yeah.
Any further questions for the
Did you say
chair?
you had a second question?
Yeah, I forgot.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Any further questions for the chair? All right, seeing none. Oh, Abby?
So when people make inquiries, can they be anonymous or do you always have the authority to say who it is?
So this came up last semester because I got like 4 or 5 anonymous inquiries like back to back about some of the same issues, and I could tell it was the same person because it was like they had the same grammar mistakes over and over again, like spelling errors, and they would always put like anonymous at AUSG.org as their email, which isn't a thing. So which is like you can't. So It wasn't in the rules anywhere that you can't adjudicate an anonymous inquiry. I put it in the judicial register that, well, I amended it and the Senate approved, that we can't adjudicate anonymous inquiries because we don't have a name to assign to it. And also if we need to hold a hearing, we can't ask that side to come to the hearing because we don't know who they are. So we put it in the judicial register that anonymous inquiries can't be done. Before that, this is just a little tangent. Before that, the only reason I couldn't accept inquiries was based on merit, was the word it was used, and then I got an inquiry filed against me saying I wasn't doing things properly because I was giving justifications for some of the inquiries based on the fact that they're anonymous, and some of them were the fact that they were outside our jurisdiction. So I was getting an inquiry filed against me because I was using that wording. So we put it in the register that I can dismiss things based on a lack of merit, it's outside of our jurisdiction, or it's anonymous.
Any further questions for the chair? All right, seeing none.
Jeremy, do you?
Yeah, do you
I
have
have
any?
a question about it, just ask me.
Okay.
Cool.
All
Open
right,
it up.
thank you, Brian. Okay, so for my report, I released 3 legislative orders this past week. So the one establishing the freshman fellowship program. So if any of you know any freshmen who are interested in getting involved in Senate or who would like to know more about Senate, encourage them to apply via the AUSG website. The second legislative order assigned, updated the committee assignment. So the new senators now have standing and special committee assignments as well as ad hoc committee assignments. And then the third legislative order specifically mandated all standing committees to meet once legislation is referred to them. So I know CATA has already met, so Student Rights and Services will have to meet to consider the case policy book, and then the finance. What?
We're meeting after.
Okay, yeah, I know that. And then the finance committee would have to meet to consider the budget policy book and then the finance policy book. And then that was it for my report. Any questions for me? Jeremy?
Do we have any people that have applied for the freshman fellowship thing?
Not yet. We need to
No.
start pushing marketing for that.
Katie?
Yeah, so, your freshman fellowship, are they like, they're not full center?
No, so essentially what the freshman fellowship program would be a shadow program, so to speak. So freshmen would come into Senate meetings, they wouldn't have speaking rights or voting rights. They would observe the meeting and then they would choose a senator to shadow. They can also shadow me, so to come with the senator to office hours, to any events the senator attends on campus, to any committee meetings, and just to kind of get a perspective of what a typical AUSG senator would do. Bobby?
If there are vacancies for which these fellows would be applicable, wouldn't you consider appointing them to be senators even if they apply for the first year fellow
Yes.
program?
So depending on what it is they apply for, and obviously depending on credits, because depending on which Senate vacancy, there's a specific credit limit, or depending on what school they're in, we would make that consideration. And then obviously if it's for a full Senate seat, they would have to go through CRP and full Senate confirmation. Jeremy?
I just think this is a great idea, so I wanted to apply.
Thank you. Did you have something?
No.
Oh, okay. Any further questions for me? And then that same email also had the weekly Senate briefing, so I just want to make sure you all are getting that and it's useful.
Side note, please check your emails. I finally made a doodle poll and everything else. There's a ton of business. I kind of liked Ryan's thing from last meeting about getting everyone together and just creating bonding events, and that's my side note.
Yes, so please check your emails regarding that. All right, any more questions for me? Okay. Moving to reports from committees, so we have CATA. It doesn't have to be a formal report. Yeah.
So CATA met on Thursday at roughly 6 o'clock to review the 4 policy books that we're responsible for. All 4 were approved by CATA, so that's why they're on the agenda today. Couple of side notes about that. One was that it was pretty much 3 of the policy books just needed some edits in terms of like the structure and formatting of things. Just like the numbering was off, the alignment was off, like kind of nitpicky things. So I fixed that, sent it to Sean, he sent it out to everyone.
Yeah.
So you should all have that, but none of the text of the actual document was changed. The most that was altered was like adding a heading to make it a formal section or subsection or something like that. And it wasn't changing the actual content of the policy. And then in addition, just to note, I guess for CATA, we had some, not communication problems, but communication problems like lack of response. And on Thursday night, we had to kind of scramble to find a proxy so that we can meet one as a committee. And so members of CATA would be able to reach out to me and say, that's method of communication or something similar to that. That would be very much appreciated. We're not gonna have like regular meetings, like what Sean was saying, like as something is referred to us before we need to meet. But we need to have like a good response.
Thank you. All right. Any questions for Kata? Jeremy?
I would like to applaud the chairwoman and her committee for being and getting these through. Sam, thank you for that.
Any further question, Wayne?
I just want to say, like, I know you have a busy schedule and everything, and I did fulfill policy books. I just really do commend, like, everything that you've been able to fulfill within such a short time frame. And I apologize for that going, but I do really think you did a really good job of planning and executing.
Craig?
Yes, thank you, Katie. And in particular, when it comes to the programming policy book, Article 3, responsibilities of the programming boards, Section 7, Senate obligations. I just have a quick question. So this policy book goes into effect after we approve of it. So what happens if a programming director does not present to the Senate? How will CATA keep those directors responsible?
Could you repeat the section that was in?
Yes, policy book, programming, Article 3, Section 7, Senate obligations. Programming directors are required to present to the undergraduate Senate once a month. So I assume since September has passed already, that we should accept, an October presentation after this policy book is approved.
Yeah.
So what would the consequences, or I guess, what happens if someone doesn't fulfill this obligation?
I mean, since I'm still fairly new to the role of manager, I'm not entirely sure. What I would propose doing is reaching out to the directors and just making them aware that they self-present for the month of October, our last meeting of the month of October is this day.
And I guess, would the programming director have to give Sean, I guess, a week's notice, 3 days notice? When, I don't know how that would work with, I don't know how Sean is going to approach this policy book and enforcing, the presentations, but just because if it's the last Sunday meeting of the month.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, either if, like, sending out a notification, like, you have to present this month, we still get it here. So,
Okay, great.
like, make sure you come see us by this, not necessarily saying, like, have all the programs come on the last Sunday.
Further questions for Kata? Jeremy?
I have a question, but I don't know if it's not specific to that. Brian may have to answer. Can we request to hear from one of them?
One of the directors?
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Mhm.
So how does that work?
You could either do that through a directive saying, I direct X director to report to Senate on X date on X matter,
Okay.
or you can do it through a bill.
And that directive needs to be approved by.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Also, you could censure them. If they're like-
Yeah.
If you don't approve of something they're doing and you want them to come to the next meeting, you could censure them, but that's.
Bobby?
Yeah, so those two things exist, but for the purposes of better interpersonal interaction and also time, because you need to do those things through parliamentary procedures and a directive needs to be signed by the president. You can email them, firstname.lastname.usg.org, or talk to Mulan, who's their boss. And like, if that doesn't work, then you can work on your your powers. But I think asking people first, I think they're generally receptive. So that'll do probably.
And do they all have office hours? Or is it
It's in
just-
the programming policy book that
Yeah.
they do. The KPU 7 Founders Day are in MGC 250, and Women's Initiative is in MGC 264, I believe. It's right next door to you guys.
All right, any further questions for Kata? All right, seeing no further question, we'll move to new business. Seeing no new business, we'll move to old business. So first to the consideration of policy book 1819-006, the ethical and judicial standards. Would the sponsor like to speak on that? Bobby?
Yeah, that's me. Hi, everyone. So the ethical and judicial standards lay out some rules for how student government members should act vis-a-vis each other, what their ethical responsibilities are, and how they should handle student government resources. And previously, or currently, the rules as they exist now is one of my least favorite governing documents, because first of all, it spends way too much time talking about like this really arcane system of dispute resolution that is under the purview of the comptroller. And to my knowledge, that has never been used. And also, like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that the comptroller is doing this, because, you know, they might not know who these people are, or they might be a problem that needs to be resolved, like the comptroller could be part of the problem. So I've pretty much rewritten the entire ethical and judicial standards here, for the most part, to focus less on that dispute resolution system and more just in general about what people in the organization should and shouldn't do. So I'll go through the articles really quick. The first article talks about jurisdiction and enforcement, and that is to say, first of all, that this is for the most part just about your like student government members in their student government capacity. Because every once in a while in the elections, we have people file judicial board complaints saying that such and such random student violated the ethical and judicial standards, but random students aren't under our rules. And it also moves enforcement of this under the judicial board, just like all the other governing documents, rather than the comptroller, because I don't know exactly what my position's nexus is to enforcing the ethical and judicial standards. So in Article 2, rules for a healthy working space, the only things that I kept in the judicial register are here, and that is abusive language. I kept most of their stuff about abusive language. But other than that, I have two main types of prohibitions in here, other than just at the top a general description that you should be nice people. But the two kinds of prohibitions I have are internally prohibited behavior. So that's the abusive language I talked about earlier, that's coming over from the previous judicial register, and general harassment, which is just pretty much anything that's you're doing bad to another person. And I adopted these definitions of harassment and other specific things that I'll get into later, looking at AU's conduct code and GW's conduct code, and just also my general intuition. So that's what these are based on. So internally prohibited behavior is things that you are prohibited from doing as a student government member to another student government member in your capacity as a student government member. So you can't harass other people in student government, and you can't use abusive language to them. And that's only stuff you do inside student government. And then we have under section 3 of this article, universally prohibited behavior. And that is things that if you're a student government member, under our rules of the organization, you're prohibited from doing this in any context. We have 3 kinds of things here: hazing, identity motivated harassment, and sexual harassment. And I've included these things in here, these 3, in any context. Like if you haze someone in your Greek organization, you're in violation of student government rules. Or if you commit a hate crime somewhere just in your day-to-day life, you're in violation of student government rules. These 3 in particular, because I think that these 3 qualities of a person are not likely to be contained to just the context in which they happened. If you're someone who hazes, that poses a threat to a group organization like this that has like admission and group dynamics. So these are the sorts of things that I'm proposing that be universally prohibited for student government members to do, because if you do these things in any context, you are likely to do them in our context. Then also under this section, we have a balanced workload that's just putting some standards in place that, these activities, would someone motion for me to have more time?
All right, speaking time has expired. Is there a motion?
I motion to extend it by a minute.
Is there a
Please.
second?
Um,
Discussion on the motion?
I would like more time. I'm halfway through. You can just give me like as much time as I want, or like 5 minutes. Yeah.
We have to entertain the motion to extend by a minute first.
Okay, well, just,
The motion gets seconded?
Oh, yeah, it was seconded.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
so-
she can't.
yeah, just go ahead and do this, and then when I run out of time again, you can have more time.
All right, discussion on the motion. Seeing no discussion, we'll vote on the motion. All those in favor of extending speaking time for Bobby for 1 minute, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Motion,
Yeah.
speaking time.
So balanced workload says that if you're a superior to someone, you can't impose on them to do so much that completion of their responsibilities would hamper their mental health when considering also their academic, social, and personal responsibilities. And also, it applies that to oversight, just making it a rule that when people who have oversight responsibilities are conducting oversight, it's a rule that you have to take into consideration someone's balanced workload. Article 3, ethical standards. So yeah, don't abuse the power of your position. Section 1 of this article also came from the old ethical and judicial standards. Conflict of interest says if you have a conflict of interest, work with a superior or colleague to do something about that. Non-discrimination actually also came from the previous judicial or ethical and judicial standards, so that's there. And then use of resources. So we have a bunch of stuff about office space. This assigns every office to someone who's responsible for administering it. The comptroller has also historically been in charge of managing office stuff. So it says the comptroller can also issue guidelines to people. Yeah, just like 2 more minutes, please.
Speaking time has elapsed. Is there a motion? Yeah.
I motion to extend this by 2 minutes.
All right, is there a second on the motion? All right, discussion on the motion. Seeing no discussion, we'll vote on the motion to extend speaking time by 2 minutes. All those in favor of the motion say yay.
Yay.
All opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Extend by 2 minutes.
And then if you need office supplies, I put in here that you can come to me to get office supplies. You should turn the lights off when you leave your office. Case leaves, where did Cassie go? Case leaves their lights on all the time, and I'm like, to stop. And I used to have swipe access to their office, so I would go in and turn the lights off, but somebody took it away from me. So we're putting that in the rules and having a J board then. And yeah, also be responsible in your use of student government office supplies. Don't just take them for your personal use, and so on. That is the ethical and judicial standards. So if I can clarify anything, let me know.
All right.
You said you were in a G board, or you don't have swipe access?
No, that they turn their lights on, but I'm not actually going to J board.
All right, questions for the sponsor? Seeing no questions,
All right.
we'll move straight into discussion on policy book 1819-006, the ethical and judicial standards.
I don't know what you're saying. Didn't hear you.
Discussion.
You can say it in discussion.
All right. Okay. Discussion. Jeremy.
Does this have the thing that was invalidated last?
No, I think you're talking about the judicial register.
Oh, which one is this?
This
one?
is
This
the
is
ethical
policy
and
book
judicial standards.
1819-006, ethical and
sorry.
judicial standards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And invalidated. To my knowledge, this doesn't have anything in it that has ever been invalidated by the judicial board.
Okay. That answers my question.
All right. Any further discussion on the policy book as a whole? All right. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move straight to vote on policy book 1819-006 in its entirety, the ethical and judicial standards policy book. All those in favor of approving the policy book say yay.
Yay.
All opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chairs, the yeas have it, and the policy book is passed. All right, now moving to the consideration of policy book 1819-011, the programming policy book. the sponsor is not here, so we'll go ahead and move straight into discussion on policy book 1819-011, the programming policy book. Okay, discussion on the programming policy book. Bobby?
Yeah, one thing, obviously it's for you all to decide, but I think under Article 2, Section 1, about programming board appointment, it sets out the system of ranked choice voting between like the vice president, the outgoing programming director, and somebody else, maybe. It sets up the system for them to vote on who is the next programming director that gets appointed. And like, first of all, I don't know whether that is allowed under the bylaws, because the bylaws just say that it's the current or the vice president who appoints these people. But I also think that this is a bad idea. And when I asked Mulan about this a few weeks ago when this was introduced for first reading, I asked him like, what is the deal with this? And he didn't seem to be married to it as a concrete rule. So I would encourage the Senate in this case to just have the vice president appoint people, as has always been the case. And also in general, what I would like to see from this policy book, I'm gonna kind of be in a soapbox now, and this does not represent the opinion of the executive board or me as comptroller necessarily, but I think that the vice president should be given more centralized authority over the programming boards, because they're kind of drifting away from the rest of student government and becoming their own kinds of things. And I think that if that happens, they will inevitably just become part of the university like AUCC did. Like AUCC used to be a part of student government, and they got their independence, and they're supposed to be an independent organization, but they are essentially just a colony of the Center for Student Involvement now. So I would not like that to happen to the programming boards, because I think it's valuable that we have student-run programming. That's kind of unique as a university, and I think it's a good thing. But that is only going to happen if they are part of student government, in my opinion. And the way to ensure that that stays the case is to make sure that the vice president has authority over them. So I would encourage you guys to make the vice president independently appoint the programming directors and not need votes from the outgoing programming directors. And also, in any place that you want to, take power from the directors if you want to and give it to the vice president.
All right, thank you for the discussion, Brian.
Just as a point of government document parliamentarian things, I would say there's probably a governing document problem here. Just because it's the outgoing vice president, the incoming vice president, and the current director of the department. It says they can vote, which essentially, like, if the incoming vice president wants this person, the other two don't, then they would be outvoted, which does take away their bylaw authority to be able to appoint people. So I can't tell you to amend it or not, but I would go ahead and say that there's probably an issue here, governing document initial authority wise.
And then just a point of clarification in terms of the amendment process. So with the judicial opinions 14007 and 14008, the Senate has the authority again to amend policy books. All right, with that discussion on the policy book as a whole, Jeremy, I'm sorry.
It's okay. So I guess to clarify what you just said, we could amend this?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
given the new judicial opinions, yes.
I'll get to that.
Plus, this is a brand new policy.
Yeah.
So when you were saying about centralizing and giving the vice president more authority when it came to programming, does he not have that already? Because I know like they're under his cabinet. So how is that working so far?
Well, it's just kind of norms right now. Like, there's not a lot of rules about it. So if the vice president says something to the programming boards and the programming boards say no, we're just going to do our own thing, like, there's not any rules about that. And under the norms that exist right now, the programming boards are kind of semi-autonomous, and they might be able to get away with it. But an example of this drift happening in real time is that I think last year was the first year that programming board expenditures, for instance, did not go through the same approval process as all other things. Like, I, as comptroller, would not make sure that they are compliant with our rules and give them internal approval. Now, starting last year, the programming boards do their own expenditures independently. And they also work with different advisors in the university, like student government as a whole has one advisor, and then the programming boards do their own thing. And like, yeah, there's a whole lot of things where the programming boards are sort of drifting away from the rest of student government. And I think if the Senate wanted to make them more concretely part of this organization, the way that they could do that would be to give the vice president more central authority over their affairs.
Okay.
All right, further discussion? Jeremy, go ahead.
I think I would like to make an amendment.
All right.
Off of what I've heard, I would like to strike from numerical in the first sentence all the way to right there, Article 2, Section 1, first line.
Okay.
I would strike from numerical ranking process to maybe the whole thing. Strike, yeah, from numerical process all the way down in that section.
I think that's gonna leave you with a.
I have a parliamentary inquiry.
Sure.
Yeah, Brian is parliamentarian. If they got rid of this whole section about appointment, wouldn't that just leave the current bylaw system where the vice president appoints people with Senate confirmation?
Yeah, plus if you do,
Oh,
if
okay.
the current amendment, again, I'm not gonna say it's or not, the
Uh-huh.
current amendment would leave the only thing left in this being the selection of the programming directors is determined by.
Oh, I was gonna add something.
Okay, that's a separate amendment.
Oh, okay,
So,
but
yeah.
off of what I'm understanding, if I were to just strike that whole part out, it would go to the bylaws, which allows him to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Just strike out that whole thing,
So,
that whole section.
okay.
And it's clerical, like renumber the other ones.
Okay, so the amendment is to strike the entirety of Article 2, Section 1?
Mhm.
Okay, is there a second on the amendment? All right, discussion on the amendment. Katie?
I have a question, so, I think the general sentiment behind this clause, was because what Mulan was saying when this was introduced at first reading is that, coming in as vice president, you don't always have that knowledge or experience of what KPU or sub or like any of the other programming boards need or are capable or like do during the course of the year. And so the choice to include the outgoing vice president and the current director of that organization was a way to get input from them as to what is required in this role. And so I guess my question would be, is there a way that we could rephrase that section to say like, while the directors of the programming boards are appointed by the vice president is allowed to consult with the outgoing vice president, the current programming board director, and someone else if they feel the need to do so, just to like formalize that.
Yes, but it would have to be through a separate amendment.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Jeremy?
have another question, because I agree with you on this. Even though the bylaw says that the vice president appoints, could he not confer with anyone that he wanted to in helping him make that decision?
No, the only thing that has to happen is the vice president to nominate them, and
Uh-huh.
then the Senate to confirm them. There's nothing saying that the vice president can't go to other people. Vice president can talk to everybody in the university that wants to about this.
So he could still consult with the outgoing and,
So yeah, so this, getting rid of this doesn't affect the vice president's ability to talk to other people about it.
okay,
It's like formalizing that
In the-
conversation.
okay.
I think this is the general, sentiment of what we want.
okay.
Bobby?
Yeah, on that point, after you guys strike this section, you could put something in saying, in this exact place, like the vice president shall seek the advice of such and such and the other people.
All right, further discussion on the amendment. All right, seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on the amendment to strike the entirety of Article 2, Section 1. All those in favor of approving the amendment, say yay.
Yeah.
All opposed, say nay. In the opinion of the chairs, the yeas have it, and Article 2, Section 1 is struck. All right, the floor is now open for discussion on the whole policy book.
I move to amend Article 3, Section 7.
Article 3, Section 7, okay.
So, I mean, Senate is only mentioned 3 times within the entire policy book, and Bobby made a good point about, directors of, in the vice president's cabinet losing their AUSG identity. Well, first, it's because they don't show up to these meetings. Well, I'm not saying all of them don't show up, but very seldomly they show up to Senate meetings. So programming directors are required to present to the undergraduate Senate once a month. And then just to add on to what discussion, Katie and I had earlier in front of the Senate, is that the programming director shall notify the Speaker of the undergraduate Senate.
Hold on, can you repeat that again? Sorry.
The programming director shall notify the Speaker of the undergraduate Senate.
Okay.
How many days' notice would you like in advance?
3 business days.
3 is fine by me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's your amendment.
Like when do you require, if someone if a member of the public wanted to present to the Senate, when do they have to notify?
I'm usually very generous, but again, it's your
Yeah,
amendment.
you're too
I'd say
Yeah.
3 to 5.
At least.
This is absolutely ridiculous. There's no asking people what the amendment is, like, no one gets to talk about that.
Actually, no, I don't like that. Our parliamentary has been, okay, shall notify the Speaker of the undergraduate Senate by Wednesday. By Wednesday.
The Wednesday,
Okay,
the
I
Wednesday
got-
before the meeting?
I got another issue.
By
You know what, go for it. Keep going.
By Wednesday,
Let's let him finish it first.
Okay.
Wednesday at 11:59 p.m.
Okay.
Which Wednesday?
Before they present to the Senate. Before they present. Just so Katie and Sean, they know that, they're coming. They're coming to Cowtown to this side. I'm open to discussion.
Okay, well, first, is there a second on the
I
amendment?
second it.
Okay. Discussion on the amendment as a whole, yeah, Jeremy?
I think this is so interesting. But as far as like this thing, yeah, I like it.
Okay, Bobby?
Yeah, so the bylaws say that the Speaker organizes regular Senate meetings and that they happen, if it's possible, they have to happen once a week, but it doesn't say on Sunday. So Wednesday is 3 days before Sunday. I would recommend that you just say 3 days before and not on Wednesday, because what if the meeting happens on Tuesday or Thursday or Wednesday? So yeah, I would encourage that.
All right, further discussion on the amendment, Shannon?
It's make a motion to amend the amendment.
Excellent.
All right, second? Okay,
Second.
and what's the, Okay.
To 3 business days prior.
Can we do 72 hours?
It's her amendment, no one else gets to
Okay,
do it.
Charlie. Okay.
Let's let her finish the amendment, get it seconded, then we'll talk.
Wait, do you need a second or something? Or is that what
I
we're
got
doing?
it.
there is a second.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if there was, but I was about to do it.
3 business days prior to their presentation.
And Google Docs does not make this any easier.
Okay.
Okay, discussion on the motion to the amendment, the motion to amend the amendment. Jeremy?
I think that this was good because, we went from Wednesday, not necessarily thinking about when the meeting may be, to now it's like 3 days. So like the meeting can be on like Wednesday, and 3 days before Wednesday, that has to be it. So that was good, because you never know what day the meeting may be.
3 business days.
Three business days.
That's when
Please stop talking out of order.
All right, further discussion on the motion to amend the amendment. Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on the motion to amend the amendment. All those in favor of the motion to amend the amendment, which is to replace by Wednesday at 11:59 PM before the presentation to the Senate, and replace it with 3 business days prior to the next meeting. All those in favor of that, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed, say nay. All right, in the opinion of the chairs, the yays have it, and the motion passes, and the amendment is in effect. Okay, discussion on the entirety of the programming policy book.
Point of order,
Mhm.
still gotta do the whole amendment.
Yeah.
We just did the second order amendment.
Okay, now discussion on the motion.
This amendment,
Yeah, yeah.
yellow amendment.
Yeah, discussion on the motion to fully amend that
Yeah, the
motion.
struck stuff get taken out.
Yeah.
And then the-
Oh, yeah.
Okay, discussion on that. Shannon,
I motion to vote on the.
is there a second on the
I
motion?
second.
As amended.
Discussion on the motion. All right, we'll move straight to vote. All those in favor of the amendment to add, the programming director shall notify the Speaker of the undergraduate Senate 3 business days prior to the next meeting, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed, say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the yeas have it, and the motion passes. The amendment's in effect. All right, now discussion on the entirety of the policy book. Jeremy.
I would like to propose another amendment. Can we go back to the thing that we like took out?
Where,
Which?
which,
Like working.
Oh, okay. I would like to
Okay,
withdraw. mine.
out of order.
Please
Oh.
stop
Yeah.
rushing back and forth like that.
All right, Jeremy, what were you?
I would like to withdraw mine. Can I do it? Like,
Just never mind.
never mind.
Okay,
I'm.
okay. Discussion on the entirety of the bill, Katie.
Yeah, I'm working on something to send you to replace what.
Okay.
Yeah.
Discussion on the entirety of the policy book, Bobby.
I'm gonna pull out something that we used to do in the 12th Senate. Since there's a lot of ideas flowing around and apparently we're not living up to snuff in terms of parliamentary procedure according to the parliamentarian, something that we used to do in the 12th Senate back in the old days is that we would move for a period of time, like 5 minutes, into an unmoderated caucus, which means you guys can just talk like a normal get together of people. So if you want to do that and just kind of get your ideas flowing first and then come back into parliamentary procedure, you could do that.
Parliamentary.
So
Suspending the rules?
The proper way to do this would be to suspend all of the rules of debate forum.
Correct.
That is and you have to specify for the
The amount of
period
time.
of, you can't give a timeline, you have to give like for the period of discussion of the
No.
book or,
Why couldn't you do it in a period of time?
because the rules of debate forum are suspended for the purpose of related to a motion.
Well, as a point of inquiry,
Mhm.
could the Senate instead recess for 5 minutes and talk and then come back? And that would have the same
Yeah,
effect.
but nothing official can happen.
Yeah.
You guys can just talk, you can motion, yeah, you can recess.
Okay. All right, the floor is open for discussion. Jeremy.
Jeremy would like to motion to suspend the rules on the discussion of this policy book.
Okay, is there a second on that motion? Seeing no second, motion fails. Okay, the floor is now open for discussion on the entirety of the policy book. Katie.
I'm motion to amend the programming policy book with the text that I just.
Is there a second on the
I second.
motion? Okay.
can you forward it to me real quick? Give it like 40 minutes. Thank you, Shannon, for filling out the doodle poll. Did it send? Oh, there it is.
Okay, discussion on the amendment to Article 2, Section 1 of the programming policy book. Katie.
Yeah, so this basically just says that Vice President appoints the programming board director. They can, this is like formalizing, that they can consult with the outgoing Vice President and the current director of the programming board, and that they can talk about it.
Further discussion on the amendment. Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll move to vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment to insert the highlighted language into Article 2, Section 1, replacing the language that we struck out, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the yeas have it. And the amendment passes and is in effect. Okay, the floor is open for discussion on the entirety of the policy book, Curtis.
In regards to Article 3, Section 7, I just wanted to get a feel of the Senate for what happens if, programming directors do not fulfill their Senate obligations. Do we insert a clause in here saying that if the programming director of a certain board does not, fulfill their Senate obligation, they shall be suspended? Or, you freeze their financials. Let's talk about it.
Okay, Katie.
Yeah, so Brian, is there anything that you know of in the bylaws or the constitution regarding that, or does it have to be in the policy?
So the freezing of the funds, first a blood vessel in my eye, I think, that can't happen.
Hypothetical, not a reality.
Well, Ashley.
Why not? Point of order.
Wait, yeah, Jeremy, yeah, Bobby.
Does it not say in the Constitution that the Senate has the ability to control student government funds?
They do. I would say that just automatically being able to freeze funds if a programming director doesn't report to Senate, probably.
It's a bad idea.
And plus it says that they control the funds through the passing of legislation. So I'm gonna say that probably relates to legislation regarding the funds themselves. With regard to punishments they can impose on the programming directors for not doing this, I mean, obviously they can get J-boarded. You can put something in there that says they're. Keep talking. Let me think about it for a second. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we are still in discussion on the entirety of the policy book. Jeremy.
A question of like the current way we do it, if somebody isn't compliant, isn't it up to CATA if it goes through the J-board thing or whatever? Is there not a mechanism now that?
CATA could do that, but anyone could J-board,
Okay.
yeah, as sitting student government member. Bobby.
I like interacting with the J-board, contrary to what you might have witnessed at these meetings. But for everybody else, in the executive branch, like J-board is their least favorite word. So I would advise you guys to have a sort of a tiered system. Like maybe after a month, like if the programming director doesn't show up, you could say in the first week, the vice president shall notify the director that they're negligent of their duties and tell them to go to the Senate. If they don't do it for 3 more weeks, such and such, and then blah, blah, blah. But like, I would advise you guys to not have like a too draconian of a system.
Okay, further discussion on the entirety of the policy book. Jeremy?
Can we just leave it up to like CATA if they decide that like they haven't came in time and just let them do it?
That's entirely up to you,
That's
Bobby.
Yeah, I would just say on that point, like it's good to have an oversight committee, but also it's good to have clear like guidelines for what happens so that everybody knows what to do and knows like what's happening if they don't do what they're supposed to.
Brian?
So the Constitution kind of gives Senate the ability to kind of, it's a little foggy, but it says that the undergraduate Senate shall be responsible for the creation and maintenance of uniform standards of conduct for both itself and all student government officers, and shall be able to remove or punish said officials for misconduct as defined by the uniform standards created. Yeah, so you're kind of in open season here. You can kind of impose things, sanctions, whatever you want to call them, so long as they're, I can't tell you if they're appropriate or not, but so long as they're not outside of the realm of insanity.
Curtis?
Right, there's a difference between being too nice and being draconian. Absolutely. So I'd like to propose an amendment to Section 7, Senate obligations.
All right, and what's the amendment?
So if a programming director does not notify or fails to notify the Speaker of the Undergraduate Senate about their presentation before the last Senate meeting of the month.
The last Sunday of the month, or?
The last meeting, because we don't know if it's gonna be Sunday forever. People gotta go to church on Sunday. Well, some
Hey,
people.
I'm Jewish.
Okay, that's the amendment?
Right, so if, then the Speaker shall notify the Vice President, the Chair of the Judicial Board, and the CATA Chair. Gotta keep everyone in the loop. The Executive, the Judicial, and the Legislative, yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
and that's the amendment?
I shall notify about this, I don't know.
Okay.
Does it sound good?
Okay, well, first, is there a second on the amendment?
I second.
Okay, discussion on the amendment. Katie?
Just to clarify, because we were making the decision, I guess here with like, this is just saying, we're gonna notify people that there's a problem, were we going to do anything?
Right, and then oops. Sorry, I forgot. May I please amend the amendment?
You're motioning to amend the amendment.
Yes. I forgot this second.
Can we just?
Yes.
Okay, we'll entertain your motion to amend the amendment. And
Because there
what's
was a little
the
talk
motion?
going on too.
Okay, what's the,
Yeah, what's the second part of your amendment?
So delete the period
Okay,
and then say, and the Chair of the Judicial Board and the CATA Chair.
wait, and the Chair of the Judicial Board, the CATA
Oh,
Chair?
wait. So basically, I just want to say the Chair of the Judicial Board has the discretion to J-Board. No.
Unfinished.
Okay.
all right, order.
The Speaker.
Okay, Curtis?
Okay, then the Speaker shall notify the VP, the Chair, and the CATA Chair about their infraction. Yeah, that's a good question. This period, I like it where it is. If y'all wanna take further action,
Okay,
use the funds maybe.
is there a second to the motion to amend the amendment?
It's just saying about their infraction.
If I wanted,
Wait, hang on. Is there a second to the motion to amend the amendment? Yes.
if I wanted to amend the amendment,
No, there's no third tier amendment.
Okay, like if I wanted to add something to
It's in the
this, can I
standard
do
code,
that,
there's
or
no
do you
third
have
tier.
to?
There's no third tier.
Okay, I'm sorry, Katie, your question?
If I wanted to modify,
Uh-huh.
do we have to like pass it?
You need to vote on this first
Well,
and
you can
then
just,
new
like, let this go
modifications.
without a second, and then do whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion to amend the amendment? Seeing no second, the motion to amend the amendment fails, and that will be strict from.
That's just the 3 words.
Okay. Discussion on the current amendment,
I need
Katie.
to amend the current amendment.
Okay.
So,
And say,
can we change it so it says the speaker shall notify the respective programming director, and then like leaving vice president, chair of day board council, just adding like, and the programming director, so that they know. They're like their respective programming director. And then. If the respective programming director does not notify the speaker of presentation within mistaken. Then. I don't know.
So just a period.
Well.
Well, it kind of needs a phrase.
Action will be taken.
You
Right,
can-
well. Well, okay, so like. Then the.
This is taking a little long.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like how to. Requesting that they come to speak with like censuring, right?
Okay.
So, yeah, I know this is like.
Okay. Yeah, did you have more to
Yeah,
add?
so then the Senate will censure the program document.
Okay, and that's the amendment? That's it? Okay, is there a second to the amendment?
Second.
Okay, discussion on the motion to amend the amendments. So this highlighted portion. Bobby?
I would suggest that this be changed a little bit, and since Brian is thinking let us do third order amendments, which are 3 times as fun, you just have to do it after this gets adopted. But instead of automatically censuring them, like you could leave it up to the Senate's discretion, every individual case by saying a censure will be put on the agenda of the next meeting, and then the Senate can decide. So that's a suggestion.
That's kind of what
Okay.
Discussion on the motion to amend the amendment. Abby?
Maybe let's just pass this and then look amend it again.
Okay, is there a motion there?
You know, you just-
No, okay. Further discussion on the motion to amend the amendment.
We have
Brian?
some motion and vote.
Yeah, Brian?
I have this censure thing, the rules of debate and decorum says that censure happens when it's passed by Senate by a 2/3 majority.
And that's why it should be on the agenda.
Yeah, a censure motion can be made from the floor by any senator.
This is above the rules.
No, the rules of decorum are above this. Yeah, so, yeah, I'm just gonna throw that out there. The censure thing, we might run into.
Point of order, we're about to lose quorum.
Oh, really?
We have a member of the public.
Do you,
Eric, would you like to proxy for it? I formally accept the proxy.
okay, I proxy too. Okay, we have quorum. Okay, further discussion on the motion to amend the amendment. Bobby?
I'll just use this opportunity to advise you on your bill, I suppose Brian's parliamentary opinion as well, that if Eric were not here, the only other person who could proxy would be me. So just consider that. You're all gonna lose quorum every time, I promise you. But that's a separate topic.
Okay, discussion on the motion to amend the amendment. Oh, yes.
Perhaps that's a problem with the people that are elected. That they're not efficient.
This is not germane to what we're talking about.
Not campaigning.
Okay, yeah, point of inquiry.
What are we doing right now? 'Cause we've been doing
So,
a lot
right, yeah. Okay, right now, we're on the discussion of the motion to amend the amendment. So right now, our
What's in
discussion
orange?
is related to what's in orange.
Thank
Okay, Katie?
Okay. I can't, no, okay. I move to vote on the amendment to the amendment with the intention of going back and amending it after.
Don't add that last part.
Okay.
Second it.
Okay, it's second, okay. Discussion on the motion to vote on the motion to amend the amendment. Seeing no discussion, we'll move straight to vote. All those in favor of the motion to amend the amendment, so to add the orange text, the
motion to move to vote.
the motion to move to vote on the amendment, to the amendment, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, all those in favor of the motion to amend the amendment, so to add the orange text say yay.
Yay.
All opposed say nay. All right, the amendment passes, is now in effect. Okay, and then we still have the text in yellow, the text
I would
before that.
like to amend the amendment.
Okay,
So striking the last 4 words,
Censure the program director.
the Senate will consider or like.
Oh wait, consider.
Censuring the respective program director at the following second.
okay, is there a second? We have a second. Okay, discussion on the motion to amend the amendment. All right, seeing no discussion, we'll move straight to vote on the amendment to the amendment, so the text in orange. So all those in favor of passing the amendment to the amendment, so to add the orange text, which is to strike censure the program director and replace it with considering censuring the respective programming director at the following undergraduate senate meeting, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed say nay. The yeas have it. The amendment passes and is in effect. Katie?
I move to vote on the amendment.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, discussion on the motion. Seeing no discussion, we'll move straight to vote on the entirety of the amendment, which is to add the highlighted section to Article 3, Section 7. Okay, all those in favor of adding the highlighted section to Article 3, Section 7, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed say nay. The yeas have it. The amendment passes and is now in effect. Okay, discussion on the entirety of the policy book. Bobby?
Yeah, so something in fact getting to drift. I don't think we have the wherewithal right now to go through every time and consider, or you all would have the wherewithal to go through every time and consider like every instance where this policy book gives a power to the programming director exclusively that you might want to shift back to the vice president. I don't think we want to do that right now. So what you all could do is in Article 2, under the responsibility of the vice president, you could add language to the effect that any decision by a programming director can be overridden or modified by the vice president, including things that are given to the programming directors in this policy book. So that way, like it is clear that the programming directors work for the vice president and not just like next to them. If that makes sense.
All right, discussion on the entirety of the policy book. Abby?
I move to vote on the policy book.
All right, is there a second? Okay, discussion on the motion to vote on the entirety of the policy book. Seeing no discussion, we'll move to vote on the entirety of policy book 1819-011, the programming policy book. All those in favor of approving the policy book in its entirety as amended, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Policy book 1819-011, the programming policy book is adopted.
I have a point of inquiry.
Mhm.
Considering that the next two policy books are, in my opinion, a bit of a mess, and the Senate, we've been going for a long time, could the Senate table these until next week and come back to them?
The Senate may table it if it chooses, yes.
Wait.
Okay, now moving to the consideration of policy book 1819-012, the presidential policy book. Seeing how there's no sponsor of the policy book, we'll move straight to discussion on the policy book as a whole. Discussion, Katie?
Can I motion to table this policy book and the communication policy book until the next meeting? Or is, I'm not allowed to do that?
Yeah, one at a time.
So, one policy.
So I move to table the presidential policy book until the next meeting of undergrad.
All right, is there a
A
second?
second.
Discussion on the motion. Seeing no discussion, we'll move to vote on the motion. All those in favor of tabling policy book 1819-012, the presidential policy book until the next meeting, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed, say nay. The yeas have it. Policy book 1819-012, the presidential policy book is tabled until the next meeting. All right, moving to the consideration of,
Are these policy books made available to the public? I mean, not this specific.
yes, so once it's passed, yeah. All right, now moving to the consideration of policy book 1819-013, the communications policy book. Seeing how there's no sponsor, we'll move straight to discussion on the policy book as a whole. Joey,
I motion to table the communications policy book until the next meeting of the undergraduate senate.
is there a second? All right, discussion on the motion. Seeing no discussion, we'll move to vote. All those in favor of tabling policy book 1819-013, the communications policy book, say yay.
Yay.
All opposed, say nay. All right, the yeas have it. Policy book 1819-013, the communications policy book is tabled until the next meeting. Okay, moving to public comment. Any member of the public wishing to speak? Seeing no public,
You're a senator.
Yeah.
You're a senator.
Senator of the order.
all right. Seeing no public, we'll move to good of the order. Any executives for the good of the order? Okay, moving to Senate good of the order. Any senators for the good of the order? Katie?
I thought that next week was fall break. I don't know. Maybe it could be.
Is there a general consensus? No?
I agree, I agree.
Yeah.
You're not gonna conform.
Okay. We won't be meeting next week, so consider that canceled. All right, any more senators for the good of the order? Jeremy?
I hope everyone has a nice week, and considering we won't be meeting next week, have a nice fall break.
All right, anybody? Eric?
So just to illustrate the definition of the problematic nature of proxies, the fact that I was like raising my hand during public comment and now that there was a parliamentary inquiry, you can see that there's a bit of a gray area when we start talking about what are the intentions of my comments, my votes. So I really implore the Senate to discover what may be the best solution to really look into how to redevelop proxies, because I think it's outrageous that I have to take time out of my day to come here and really be vocal about this, when this should just be something that perceptually and something, I mean, constitutionally should already be conducted. So,
Any more senators for the good of the order? You're not technically a senator.
It's good of the order.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so just on that, like, if people like all had maximum interest and involvement in student government, this proxy thing would definitely be a good idea, but unfortunately they don't, and we have to work within the actual realities of what happens. And a Senate with someone proxying is better than a Senate that can't do anything because it doesn't have quorum. That is just true axiomatically. So I would add that to the conversation.
Okay, any more senators for the good of the order? All right, for my good of the order, be sure to keep up with office hours. We'll have another doodle poll out this week. Please make sure to fill that out. It takes like less than 2 minutes. And then we will not be meeting this or next week for CRP or for full Senate. So the next meeting will be the week thereafter. And then be expecting the weekly Senate briefing. Other than that, have a great and blessed fall break. And if there's nothing else, we are adjourned.
Okay, I'm putting out the same doodle poll. If you already filled it out, mazel tov. If you didn't, smile, you're a gamer. Hey,
Awesome.
voila. I told you, the entire thing was going. And